All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'll put on here Saturday just after 1 p.m. for the latest on Tropical Storm Beta, getting in the latest information in from the National Hurricane Center. And we're going to talk about it, what it could bring to us here in Southeast Louisiana, what we're already seeing today, and what we're going to be tracking going throughout this entire next 7 days or so as we follow this slow moving system. You can see there is the latest Tropical Storm Beta, 60-mile-per-hour sustained winds. It is moving west at 2 miles per hour, and not a whole lot of change from the 10 a.m. update or even the 4 a.m. update. It's kind of maintaining its intensity as it's been fighting a lot of wind shear this morning and through even this afternoon now. So not a whole lot of change here. No surprises with it. That's the good news. Notice though, we are getting a little burst of storms there towards the center. I'll talk more about that in just a second. But here was the latest track as of 10 a.m. Of course, they don't update it at 1 p.m. Excuse me. But you can see there, as we go through the today going into Sunday, maybe a little gradual strengthening. They do still have it possibly becoming a hurricane, but that's on the high end of the scale, it looks like. Not a whole lot of models indicate this really strengthening a whole lot, as there's quite a bit of dry air it's going to be moving into. And then as we go into Monday, Tuesday, getting close to the Texas coast, and this is where it's going to get tricky, right? It's going to slow down quite a bit here, and it is eventually going to make this gradual and kind of northeast turn and easterly turn. The big question is just where does it do it at? They do have it coming inland in Texas, but of course, that's a pretty tricky detail to kind of pinpoint right now. So for now, we'll just kind of take this with a grain of salt because we'll likely see additional changes to this. But the current forecast doesn't bring into Texas as potentially a Category 1 storm, maybe more so a tropical storm, and then turning to the northeast, riding up along the coast, and then look at that continuing to weaken. Now, of course, it all depends, the strength of this at least, once it gets to Houston or maybe southwest Louisiana, on what it does in this part. If it turns a little quicker and stays over the Gulf of Mexico, it would likely be a little bit stronger than what they're indicating here. But if it moves inland like this, it would move over land. That would weaken it some, and you'd just be looking at a rainmaker. So there's still that tricky part of the forecast of trying to determine, is it actually going to move inland, or is it going to turn before it gets there and move out over the water? So certainly something we'll be watching. Now, another important thing I want to remind everybody, and this is very much a possibility, you might actually see this system go straight into Texas, like here, go in, kind of dissipate and weaken, and not even track up here as a tropical, storm or depression. It's possible that it gets into this spot and just kind of slows down and weakens considerably as it moves inland. That is one of the many possibilities we're looking at with this kind of tricky forecast. Once again, another slow moving system. So that's the latest forecast. Let's talk about what we got going on and some of the impacts we could see from this. Tropical storm warnings, they've been issued all the way for coastal areas or coastal waters in southeast Louisiana from the mouth of the river going to the west. It doesn't include any southeast Louisiana parishes, but St. Mary Parish, Morgan City, you're under a tropical storm watch. If you go west of there and head towards just south of Lake Charles or near Lake Charles, we've got tropical storm warnings going over towards the Houston area, Galveston, and then down just north of Corpus Christi, tropical storm warnings there. So we've been seeing some winds today, and we've actually had tropical storm force conditions along the mouth of the river all morning long. If you're down here in Plaquemines Parish, you've probably been wondering what in the world is going on. We've got winds, we've got rain. You probably got a little surge coming in the east side on the east bank of Plaquemines Parish. But look at our winds gusting to 47 at that pilot station. Southwest Pass gusting to 47. And we even had some gust over 50 down here earlier this morning. So it is quite rowdy down here. You can see there a pilot station, or pilot town, excuse me, a little lower wind gust. Important to know that these are a little bit elevated too, so your winds are a little higher. Port Fourchon, you've been gusting over 30, even 40 at times. We've had gust over 30 up the lakefront. Shell Beach, you've got your tides are running high because of your strong northeast wind, gusting 25, 30 at times. So it's certainly windy out there today, and we're nearly 300 miles from the center of Beta, so kind of a broad, sprawling system, all thanks to wind shear we were dealing with today. So that wind shear is what's kept it somewhat unorganized. And that's going to continue through today. Now, wind shear is trying to weaken some, but still notice all the rainfall is well displaced from the center here off towards southeast Louisiana. So we're just going to see the rain throughout the entire day. It's going to be like it is outside right now. And your strongest winds are right there along the coast. Now, we are starting to get a little bit more development near the center, and more on that in a second, but you can see the shower activity here in southeast Louisiana, maybe some moderate rain along the coast, very light rain here in the New Orleans metro with some breaks. So overall, this isn't a flooding problem for us here in New Orleans yet. We're going to have to watch this trend over the next couple of days, though, with multiple afternoons of showers and days of showers. That stuff starts to add up eventually. So it is looking like this is going to be a big rainmaker. It's going to be slow moving like Sally was, and that means rain totals are going to add up quick. But the track is going to be, determine who sees the heaviest rain. Right now, you see the highest totals in the yellow there. That's 10 to 15 inches of rain, mainly along the coastal areas. The closer you get to the coast, the higher your rain totals are going to be. But with multiple days of this rainfall, it could certainly add up. So right now, we're calling for 3 to 6 inches in the metro and parts of the North Shore, and really most of South Louisiana. But as you get closer and south of the metro, let's say towards Lafourche, Terrebonne, Houma, Thibodaux, your totals could be higher. Morgan City, your totals could be higher, 6 to 8 inches, and then maybe 10 inches as you get closer to the coast. That's on average. This will change. These rainfall forecasts change basically constantly as we get new data in. But, we could be looking at some extended periods of rainfall throughout the next 7 days or so. So that's what we're looking at with that. Now, the thing we're going to be, why the rainfall is going to be falling so far east of this thing, even if this thing goes to Texas, we're still going to get rain from it here. And that's because of the shear. We've got this big trough that's been digging down into the northern Gulf of Mexico. And with that, it's pushing southwest wind shear on this system. So you've got this southwest wind pushing on it. That's what's pushing all the storms over here while the center stays here. And it struggled to keep those storms kind of near the center, and that's why it hasn't really intensified much. Also notice, look at all this dry air. And I mean, this is dry air coming on in from the west. Wouldn't be surprised to see this kind of get sucked up into the backside of this and maybe ingested in the core of beta. That would also keep it from becoming too strong. So if you're in Texas and you're worried about this, I mean, you should be watching this, but we're talking about the intensity. At the moment, it looks like it's not going to be in the greatest environment to really blow up into this big, strong hurricane. You're going to have a lot of dry air. The wind shear is not going to be terrible, but it's still got some wind shear. So that should kind of cap off the intensification of this storm in the near term. And, you just kind of have to watch the trends of it. The trends so far have been, though, that it is struggling. That can change at a moment's notice, though. And you can see there, it did try earlier this morning. We had a burst of storms near the center, and that's what you need for it to organize. You need storms around the center of it. And they're already getting kind of blowed off and sheared to the northwest of it. Is that you can imagine the wind shear is coming in like this and hitting the storm from the southwest, and it's pushing all of your storms in this direction. So that is going to keep it from intensifying too much. Now, if the wind shear lets up, waters out here are plenty warm. You're going to get probably some intensification. So need to watch that, especially along the Texas coast. But you saw there the west movement, 2 miles per hour. So it's really not moving. Here's why it's stalling out, though, and here's why it's heading towards the west. We've got a ridge building in from the north. This ridge is not going to be that strong. And this time of year, you don't get these super strong summertime, ridges that you see over Texas that create these 110-degree days. You just don't really see those into September and late September. So it should be a fairly weak ridge, which means it's going to just drift, barely even be pushed, but more so drift as those winds around the ridge. Those winds around the ridge do this. So they're going to be pushing it to the west kind of slowly. But as we go into Monday and Tuesday, that ridge weakens. And as it weakens, you're going to get different steering flows in the atmosphere. So when that ridge weakens, you'll get more of a northerly push from it. And that's what should start to turn this thing more into Texas. Now, if it gets into Texas and it's too weak, it could simply just dissipate in this area. I mean, it really could. But if it's strong enough, it could get into Texas and curve back this direction like this. But also, let's say it stalls out. Let's say that ridge is too strong by Sunday and Monday. The storm really slows down like Sally did. It slows down a little quicker than normal. and it stalls somewhere out here along the coast and just really slows down out here. It's possible, but that it hangs out there until something starts to push on it, that trough, and it stays in the Gulf of Mexico as a stronger system. That's a possibility, and that would bring up our impacts here in Southwest Louisiana, which is the last thing they need, of course. But it could also bring up our impacts in all of South Louisiana. So there is still a high amount of uncertainty. I saw a comment on Facebook earlier that was talking about the meteorologists have been saying uncertainty a lot. What's that about? Well, that's just weather, and these really do have a lot of uncertainty, and we need to communicate that because it's just the reality of the forecast. So anytime you get a slow moving system like this, it is just that much harder to predict exactly what it's going to do because those fine details, does it stop 20 miles this direction or does it go 20 more miles? That can mean all the difference in a strong storm, a weak storm, whether it goes into Texas and dissipates or whether it comes to Louisiana as maybe a depression or a tropical storm. So those are all what we're going to have to be watching. Now, one thing that seems certain with this, whether it goes into Texas and dissipates or whether it comes to Louisiana after Texas, is the moisture. Look at this tell of moisture on this thing. This is going into Sunday and Monday. You've got this fetch of moisture being pulled up into it like this, of course. But most of this is heading up towards South Louisiana, the northern Gulf Coast. And that means rainfall clouds are going to be here throughout Monday, probably Tuesday and Wednesday. The only thing that could lower our rain chances for the beginning of the week would be a dry slot getting in here at some point, which isn't a guarantee at all. But you get this little dry feature in here. If that's close enough to us here in Southeast Louisiana, it could bring some drying maybe by Tuesday. But, you know, I still think we'll see some showers. But even notice going into Wednesday and Thursday, we still got a lot of moisture. And then models are showing that's what's left of beta at that point, not a very strong system. This is one of those things you can see, though, that's what's left of it on the model is it sucks in that dry air. So rainfall seems like a pretty good bet regardless. We're just going to have to watch it. Let's look at the scenarios of this thing because there's some scenarios on what we could see. And this is the first scenario. This is the actual forecast right now. And I do need to adjust this so it's a little bit more representative of what we've got going on currently with the forecast. But taking it towards Texas and then curving up towards Houston, maybe Southwest Louisiana. This is for Southeast Louisiana, by the way, for the impacts. We would still see rainfall from this. We would still see some minor coastal flooding. Nothing too bad. We maybe need to lower that. And then the winds, not too bad either. A few gusty winds here and there. Now, if it takes more of this Texas track where it just runs straight into Texas and dissipates, we're still going to see some rainfall here in Southeast Louisiana, but maybe less amounts. The coastal flooding threat would be pretty low, just a little storm surge. The wind and tornado threat would be very, very low. Now, let's say this thing stalls before getting to Texas and then hooks it to the northeast before getting into Texas. That would mean it would have more time over the Gulf waters. It would not weaken if it did this scenario, and we would have higher impacts here in South Louisiana. That's a scenario. That one's probably not as likely right now, but we saw how much the forecast changed with Sally with a slow-moving system. We're just going to have to watch it on its approach to Texas. And then once it gets closer to Texas, you know, we'll have a very good idea of what it's going to do for us here in South Louisiana. So we're just going to have to watch it. That's how things go this time of year. And when you're 5, 6, 7 days out, that's a long ways out in the weather world. So we're going to see showers today. We're going to see showers tomorrow. We'll have breezy winds, tropical storm warnings along the coastal waters down to the mouth of the river to the west. Don't be out on boats. Water's too rough for that. And then pretty unsettled through the rest of the work week. And then Thursday and Friday are mainly going to depend on what beta does. So that part of the forecast is pretty fluid at the moment. And you're just we want you to check back as we continue to fine tune the forecast. So that's just 1 p.m. update. You know, we need to watch this closely. It's still hurricane season. Yes, we're in the Greek alphabet. It's been a crazy season, but it's looking like this storm would be mainly a rainmaker, a flooding problem at this point for areas from Texas all the way to Louisiana. Just need to follow the forecast very closely. So that's going to do it. Everyone have a wonderful day. Alexandra Cranford will be in at 4 p.m. She'll have your update here on social media. And of course, we'll see if beta's getting any stronger this afternoon. Thanks, everybody.